Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Artis, and today we're going to be talking about to be your best you. You got to be more efficient. As I start my cycling journey, I've realized how important efficiency is, and if we're not efficient, we could be spending a lot of unnecessary energy, and that could be depriving us from what doing the things that we really do love, or just trying to do as much as we want to do in a typical day, like working out, spending time with your family, doing the things, going to work, spending time with your family, traveling, all these things like that. So we got to learn to be more efficient if we're going to live longer. Now, one of the things I want to mention is something that I stumbled upon that is probably one of the most efficient things that I've ever seen in my life. It's a tree. This tree can live up to 5,000 years old. It is actually probably about 100 feet tall. 94 feet is what I read. It can go up to 165 feet wide in circumference. Um, Lives up to 5,000 years. Most average ones live about 2,000. These trees in the Sahara, so what happens is there's a severe drought at different times of the year. So when it does rain, this tree soaks up all its water it can and saves it in its trunk and in its branches and roots. And what happens is this saves up thousands of liters of water to help it get through the drought season. This tree also produces fruit that actually can help you to fight infections, fight diseases, fight a lot of different things out. This is very important because this fruit just doesn't fall from the tree. It stays on the tree, and if nobody picks it, it forms a hard casing around it that actually increases its shelf life. And that shelf life can last up to 3 years. That's pretty amazing. Now that's how God made this tree. And it is something that we all need to participate in and understanding like, man, if that tree is that efficient, our bodies are also designed to be efficient. That's called a baboa tree, baobab tree. Okay. And that baobab tree, we as humans, we also have bones strong enough to support steel, pound for pound. They're stronger than steel, pound for pound. If you take a block of bone the size of a matchbox, about that big, and you actually it can support 18,000 pounds of weight. That's crazy. That's crazy. 18,000, that much. But our bodies are breaking down for osteoporosis, osteopenia. We also are breaking bones because of other deficiencies, and so many different things are happening. We can sense up to 5,000 smells. If we take our nervous system and we spread it out from beginning to end, it's 45 miles. Now I live in a suburb of Chicago, and you can actually take that from where I live to Chicago and back, and you still got nervous system. That's crazy to just put your mind around that and conceive that. Also, if you take your vascular system, your cardiovascular system, and you sprace it out from beginning to end, it's 60,000 miles. Heart pumps 2,000 gallons of blood a day, and if that heart ever stops pumping, you die. We have the ability to create life, to give life. I've been blessed with 2 children. So one of the things that I want to say with that is saying that the human body is just as efficient, if not damn near more. We have probably one of the best detoxification systems in the world. But what we're doing is we're breaking down is because we are actually starting to do all these other things that are destroying our bodies, from the environment, from the toxins that we put in our body, from the food, from the stress that we're under, that we put on ourselves. Man, that doesn't sound like the American dream. So one of the things we got to do is we got to learn to be more efficient if we're going to live longer. So what's the difference between us and that tree is one of the questions that I pose. One of the questions that I pose between us and that tree is, number one, there's really not too much. We both have innate intelligence, and that innate intelligence is that life force that keeps us alive. Our heart is beating, our lungs are breathing. That innate is responsible for including all the chemical reactions, the tissues to form, the spinal cord, the master system, innate intelligence supplying every organ and tissue and cell back and forth. That tree has intelligence in it that does the same thing to make it as efficient. But if it's unbothered, if you mess with innate intelligence, we're going to start breaking down. I always say the further we get away from nature, the sicker we're going to become. And what's happening to us is that we're actually starting to move further away from innate intelligence and understand that our bodies are designed to heal, and actually looking at the Western medicine and looking at putting pills in there, and we're making the pills and surgeries and all these other things our hero when the hero is inside of us, right? And so I'm going to introduce you to 3 concepts that I've been talking about lately that actually have just awakened my perspective about health. And it's called a triangle of health. The number one thing, before I tell you exactly what you got to do to be more efficient, is number one is you got to change your mindset. You got to make sure that you're thinking healthy thoughts. You got to make sure that you adapt and you understand that there's room for efficient. There's room to improve. And if we understand that, you got to understand too, you got to ask yourself, what are my values? Like, do I want to live longer? Do I want to take care of myself? Do I want to be overweight? Do I want to lose weight? Do I want to be healthy? Period. And then you got to make sure those values line up with with the behaviors. So I'll give you an example. If you got somebody that says, you know what, I want to lose weight. You know, that's valuable to me because I want to be healthy. And then if they don't work out or they don't eat properly, those behaviors don't align with those values. And then you have a toxic culture within your body. You have a toxic body. And to avoid that, you got to make sure that, you know, so a good example is if you have somebody that's constipated, instead of taking a drug or Metamucil or something like that to actually get them to release and have a bowel movement, why about changing the way you eat, eating more vegetables? It just seems like common sense to me, right? Or if you have diabetes or you're pre-diabetic and you're one step from being diabetic, why eat a lot of sugar and carbs and just cut down on, limit them and eat more vegetables instead? Those behaviors align with those values, and then you're going to have more of a positive body, a positive culture within the system of the body, okay? Because it is a culture in the way everything works. So how do we begin? We begin to identify the values that we have, and then we got to make sure that we understand that we got to make ourselves a hero, not these doctors that you go to do surgeries, to do all these other things. You are your own hero within your body, and you got to understand that. But a lot of times as you become that hero, most heroes have a guide that guides them from point A to point B. And these would be professionals, right? And you got to use your own discernment. I give you a good example. If you ever seen the movie Karate Kid and you see Daniel-san and Mr. Miyagi, Daniel-san was the hero of the movie, right? But he went through some things and he had to learn how to fight and do the kick, the famous kick where he put the hands up and stuff like that. But Mr. Miyagi was the guide, and he gave him a plan to actually learn how to fight and do those things. So he had to wax on, he had to wax off, he had to paint the fence up and down, and he was learning different things, but Daniel-san had to do the work. And that's the same thing what happens in your life. You have to do the work. You can't expect the doctors, you can't expect all these other professionals to do the work if you're not willing to participate yourself. Because the plan is there. There's so many different diets, all work if you just do what you're supposed to do and you continue to be disciplined in doing them. I mean, so that's just one example of where you can look at it and changing your mindset. Now, as we move into the second principle, that's structure. Structure is very important because structure has 2 functions. Number one is it keeps you upright. And number 2 is it protects your nervous system. Your spine, that's your system that controls every single function in your body. One of the quickest ways to get old is to start to slouch. And when you start to slouch, you put pressure on that nervous system, and that blocks the brain from sending messages down to the rest of the body. When that happens, your body's going to just start to break down quicker and quicker and quicker. Now, I'm a cyclist. I cycle. I just rode 34 miles this morning. And one of the things that I always look at with cycling, that I learned very early when I started cycling, is that you're 1 to 2 millimeters away from being in severe pain. And a lot of people, when I take x-rays and I look at their body and I see one hip is way higher than the other, one hip is lower than the body, and they wonder why their back is hurting or their knees are hurting or starting to be bone on bone, is because they've been operating and they've been millimeters or if not inches out of alignment, and it's wearing the body and the joints down. That's one of the quickest ways to destroy your structure. And along with slouching, that creates weakness in the body, and then the body can't support itself and it starts to slump over. And then they start leaning on a cane, a walker, and then end up in a wheelchair or bedridden. And I don't want that for anybody. So if we make sure that we actually strengthen our structure to support itself so our body can sit upright, we're going to live a lot longer. We're going to be able to do a lot more things. If you look at people that have good posture versus people that have bad posture, the people that have good posture tend to usually be healthier. I mean, it's not all the case, but most of the time they are. They have less aches and pains because there's less wear and tear on their body. And that decreases the chances of them actually speeding up the process of osteoarthritis, which happens to everybody. And so one of the ways that you could do that is, number one, you have to strength train. You have to work out. You have to lift weights. You have to make sure that you're actually doing some kind of resistance training. I get people all the time that come in my office and they have osteoporosis, osteopenia, and they can have deficiency because they're not absorbing vitamin D or calcium in the body, or their body's just getting weaker because they're losing muscle mass. There's a certain condition called sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss. And when that age-related muscle loss is something that happens to all of us naturally, because our body doesn't produce as many certain hormones like estrogen and testosterone for men. And so you start to lose muscle mass in your 30s, in your late 30s. Some people now it's in their 30s, some people even younger if they don't work out. So one of the quickest ways to actually counterbalance that is to make sure that you're doing some kind of resistance training. I don't say you got to go to the gym and try to lift all the weights in the gym, but you could do body weight exercises, calisthenics, pull-ups, push-ups. If you can't do a push-up, you can start on the wall and just start gradually increasing. And that's one of the ways that you can build structure, and you can actually build the strength to support that structure. Now, the second way you could do it too is by getting chiropractic adjustments. I'm not saying that because I'm a chiropractor. Chiropractic adjustments do wonders for the body. And I'll give you an example. As I started out as a kid, I was a severe asthmatic, had a lot of different allergies, and didn't think anything of it. I thought that was something I would have to deal with for the rest of my life. But when I started getting adjusted, I got adjusted in my middle part of my back. And the only thing I can say is that when I started getting adjusted, I stopped using the asthma pump because I had a vertebrae that was shifted that could be putting pressure on the nerves going to my lungs, which caused my lungs not to function properly. Maybe not getting the full breath, or my posture was slouching and I couldn't get the full lung capacity in, which caused them to spasm. Or there's so many different things. But I noticed that once I started getting adjusted, I stopped using the asthma pump. And that's one of the things that made me become a chiropractor, because that example happened to me. And there's so many different examples happen to people like that every day in my office. And that's one of the things that you can have for yourself. Now, one of the things why you want to maintain structure too is that you don't want to fall as you get older. I'm talking to my seniors out there right now. You know, one of the worst things that can happen to a senior, especially a female, is if they fall and break a hip. If a female falls and breaks a hip, there's like 60 or 70% chance that they won't live past 3 years. And then the older you get people in their 70s and 80s, that number increases. I mean, there's a study I was reading from 2009. So, I mean, you just want to make sure that your body can support itself so you're not leaning on anything. So when you need to move, you can move. And then what happens is that you're not putting pressure on that nervous system, which controls everything. That's where people getting all these like radiculopathy, these pains that numbness and tingling in the hands and numbness and tingling in the bottom of the feet, because the structure is collapsing and it's putting pressure on the nerves, and that's causing a lot of different things. That's why structure is so important. And one of the things, the only people that I see that really work with that, what I do in my office, is a chiropractor. And that's one of the things that I do. I'm passionate about it. I can just look at somebody when I'm even walking into a store, a grocery store, and I be like, man, that person, they gotta be hurting, or their back is tight, or their hips are tight, and just having that trained eye. So how do we go from having bone stronger than steel to bones just breaking just like that? Because that leads me into the third thing, which is biochemistry. Biochemistry is critical. We got to make sure to be more efficient, we have to eat better. Before I jump into this biochemistry a little bit deeper, number one thing I tell all my patients, number one thing you got to do, you got to get your metabolic house in order. I said, Doc, what's a metabolic house? Well, you got to make sure that you have your blood pressure in check, your blood sugar, your triglycerides are lower, your good cholesterol is higher and not low. And then you want to make sure that you're not overweight. If you have 3 out of those 5 things, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, low good cholesterol, or you have a waist circumference over 40 for men, or you have a waist circumference over 35 for females, that's abdominal obesity. It's not a matter if you're going to have heart disease or a stroke or diabetes or any other kind of disease. It's a matter of when. And so you can just you can slow down or possibly even decrease the risk of getting some types of disease by avoiding metabolic syndrome, or syndrome X is what some people call it. So when I say that, means if you have high blood pressure, right, and you take blood pressure pill, that's fine, because sometimes you have to do that because your body can't regulate it. But how about trying to lose some weight? How about coming up with a plan with your medical doctor to actually say, Doc, what can you do to help me to reduce that? Because I personally don't believe that we're designed to take medicine for the rest of our lives. Or if you're pre-diabetic or you're diabetic, people put people on medicines like metformin, all these different things. How about if you lose weight, you exercise, you stop eating a lot of sugary foods that break down in sugar, like different kinds of carbs that your body converts into sugar, and then you actually just start to make lifestyle changes instead. That's going to help you right there, because if you have these conditions and you still take those pills, you still have the conditions. You just manage them and keeping them at bay. You always tell people this: you got to look at the behavior that caused the problem. Until you change the behavior that caused the problem, you're still going to have to deal with that problem at some point or another. And a lot of times our body will build up these tolerances to these drugs, and they're not even as effective as they could be. And I see that with pain drugs with a lot of my patients all the time. They'll start out with over-the-counter stuff, and then they'll go get stuff, and they say, well, this ain't doing anything for me. And, certain things don't, but you got to make sure that you get that in order. Second thing you got to do, besides getting your metabolic house in order, is that you have to make sure that you get your gut healthy. And one of the main things what cause a lot of these autoimmune diseases that I see people suffering from is because their gut is all disrupted. Their gut is not healthy. And then one of the number one things that actually destroy the gut is stress. Second thing that destroys the gut is medicines. And third thing that destroys the stress is alcohol. So those three things right there, if you can reduce all three of those things overall, your gut is going to thank you for it, because that's the way that things get into your body. And if that's disrupted, you're going to have problems like intestinal permeability, which is leaky gut. Some people develop, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. Some people have all these other conditions. What happens is you disrupt these tight junctions, and then when you eat food, your body breaks it down and it lets stuff go into the bloodstream that shouldn't go in there, and it just starts floating around. That could be creating insulin, and that could be causing problems. It could also create inflammation in the body when you're constantly stressed out. And if you want to tighten that up to actually decrease some of the inflammation and help bring some of these processes down, you have to heal that gut. It's vital. I can't stress that enough. Now, the way that you do it is two things. Number one, you got to make sure that you start eating fiber. You got to make sure that you're actually decreasing your stress. When I always talk about the nervous system and the two systems, and number one, you have the parasympathetic nervous system, and then you have the autonomic nervous system. You want to make sure that the nervous system is in parasympathetic dominant state majority of the time. The issue in the United States is that we live more in a sympathetic dominant state. That's fight or flight. I mean, we live in fight or flight so long that we're starting to become exhausted. And when you're in that exhaustion stage, man, your body's just done. And that's to the point where you're just fighting to hang on. And pretty soon you're going to break down, or you're just going to crash. And then you end up with all these other things. And people are so bad looking outside. And the simple thing you could do is, if you're feeling like that, you need to sleep. You got to sleep a good quality 7 to 8, 9 hours of sleep a night. Good deep sleep. It helps. There's some magical things that happen when you sleep. And when you do, your body can heal and can repair. That's why in hospitals, they don't have treadmills and they don't have people running around. They say sit down and rest so your body can heal. So healing that gut, number one, getting the right amount of sleep, and then getting to the last thing is you got to lose some weight. If you overweight and you walking around and your knees are hurting and all these other things are hurting in your body, you got to lose weight. If you lose 5 to 10 pounds, your body's going to thank you. Your knees are going to thank you. Your back is going to thank you. Everybody's going to look at your clothes are going to fit differently. You're going to look better. When you look better, you usually feel better. And so that's one of the things that I always talk about. So as I tie these things in together, this thing right here is called the triangle of health. So you got number one, you got to get your mind right. Number two, you got to take care of your structure. And number three, you got to have your biochemistry in order. Now, when you do those, it forms a diamond. And that diamond is what, not a diamond, but that triangle is what we call a triangle of health. And a triangle of health, 100% health is different for everybody. So somebody that's maybe 75 years old, what their body requires is totally different than somebody that's 50 or somebody that's 25. So one of the things that you got to do is, that's why it's becoming more individualized. You can't treat everybody the same because everybody's body's different. We all have different fingerprints. And so we got to approach our health the same way. And so once we tie those things together, I'm not asking you to jump across the Grand Canyon today to start, 100% doing those things. Now, if you have a lot of conditions going on, you got to do everything you can, because now this is survival mode. Now, if you can do that, you do little small steps every day and make sure you're moving in the right direction. I always got a saying, moving forward, not in trouble. When you set a goal and you go at that every day, it's going to make a world of difference. And again, like I talk about cycling, life is a lot like riding a bike. In order to keep your balance, you got to keep moving. You can't see somebody on a bicycle just stand there and not do anything. I'm not going to work out. You got to keep moving. And that's one of the things it is. So now it goes into how can we move more efficiently? So we're not spinning our wheels and not going nowhere. And then so we're not digging and just tiring ourselves out because we're going to go too fast, too early. And it's a perfect balance. And that's where I come in as the coach. So I'm like Mr. Miyagi. I can give you a plan to help get you from point A to point B. As a chiropractor, I'm more like a lifestyle coach or a lifestyle curator. And what it is we start to curate and help you to get to where you want to be. So if you want to be 100 years old, you want to live to be as old as you want to be, you got to start doing the work to help get there now. Like most people that I talk to that are retired, they plan to retire. They know how much money they got coming in a month. They know what their bills are. They know how they can survive, and they know what's going on. If you want to be 100 years old and you don't want somebody taking care, you can't just leave it up to chance and let the wind blow you in the direction that you want to go. You got to make sure that you actually do everything that you can so that you can start planning for it. So that's your North Star. So you're not just wandering out and letting the wind blow you in different directions, that you're heading in a certain direction. Now, there might be some setbacks on the way, but guess what? Everybody has some setbacks. You get back up. That's a secret. Everybody goes through some stuff. You find the right person to help get you there. And then sometimes you got to listen to that person, might be within inside yourself. All right. Hope that helps. Let's be more efficient so you can be the best version of you. Again, this is Dr. Artis. Thank you for listening.